Not a problem. Now, I've had a chance to sit down and watch the documentary, and I've got to say it is an absolutely fantastic documentary, so congratulations.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
So, I have to ask, what sparked the interest in the first place to do a documentary on the Port Adelaide Football Club?
So, I mean, we started this conversation like a few years ago, but we knew that their 150th anniversary was coming up, so 150 years of their football club. So to us, that was kind of an interesting historic milestone in itself. But then, as we got to know the personality of the club a little bit more and that sort of stuff, we thought, actually, there's a bit of a bigger story here, and a story about a community and actually trying to tell, something as to why the Port Adelaide Football Club is unique. So, yeah, that sort of started us on our journey.
Yeah. From an outside view looking in, from someone from originally from Tasmania and now in Victoria, it always looks like the Port Adelaide fans are a lot more passionate about their club than the Adelaide Crows fans. Was that something that you really found, that the football club is the centre of Port Adelaide and the fans do have that complete love for the club?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty unique point around Port Adelaide, in that they are, the only team in South Australia that have that history since 1870 that club was founded. So they're sort of, they're very much a big part of the Port Adelaide area and the Port Adelaide community. And then that's kind of carried through generations. And there was a whole saga that really set up that rivalry between Crows and the modern Port Adelaide, being that they tried to get into the AFL, and their efforts were thwarted by the SANFL team, kind of board at the time. So, yeah, they then nominated for an amalgamate team, which was the Adelaide Crows, to go through. And then Port Adelaide got the second licence. So I think some of that history, it's made people passionate, but it's also fueled this rivalry between our two state teams.
What was that like, going back over 150 years worth of history? Because I talk to a lot of people who are into American sports, and they can't believe that our home game here in Australia is 150 plus years old, because for them, clubs that turn 50 have had a long shelf life. What was that like for you, going back over the 150 years of the club, and how much of that history is still around that you were able to get access to?
Well, I think telling that 150-year story was also a little bit about telling the story of that area of Port Adelaide. And I think in South Australia, Port Adelaide was, one of the biggest commercial ports or hubs of South Australia. So it's always had a really strong history and a well-documented history. So we're pretty lucky in that sense of, there was a fair bit of archival material around that we could draw on to really paint a picture of the various eras that have led us to today. But definitely 150 years, you can't tell all of that. So we approached it in the snapshots of eras, of milestones, or even just sometimes of some images that helped kind of paint a portrait or paint moments in time that portrayed the personality or vibe of Port Adelaide.
So you mentioned before that you'd been talking to the club for a couple of years about the project. How did the club receive it when you first went to them about the idea for the documentary? Did they kind of welcome you with open arms?
Yeah, well, we're lucky in that we've done some work with Port Adelaide before, so they were keen to work with us, and we did at the beginning of this process. We were working with some other creatives as well, so they went on to then mentor us as we continued that journey. So yeah, it was pretty. It started off all films are collaborative. For this one, it felt like it started off with a lot of people collaborating and developing sort of what this film could be. So I think in that sense, you know, they were part of the conversation as well. It was their history. We wanted to do right by them and right by the fans, and yeah, but at the same time try and tell something that was a bit of a unique story, and maybe looking at it with a little bit of a different lens than has been done before.
Yeah. And did the players and the club and the coaches kind of just get used to having cameras around while you guys were working?
Yeah, well, we did a lot of the, like a lot of player interviews and a lot of the historic, you know, figures of the club, from administration or players. We were filming a lot of that in 2019. But then as we got into 2020, kind of the big plot twist of COVID happened, and we weren't allowed to the club.
Yep.
To film, because they were in the AFL, you know, quite a strict COVID bubble. So, but they're our partners. We just sort of enlisted. They've got some media people on their team, so we just tried to be resourceful and enlisted them to capture as much footage as they could for us, and just send it our way. And we'd have conversations around it, send questions back and forward, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. It became, you know, it's not the easiest way to make a film, but I think COVID interrupted a lot of processes and made you invent a new way to do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What was that moment like for you when you first heard about the pandemic? Because like you said, it was a great plot twist for the documentary, but as a filmmaker, did you ever think that perhaps this film's not going to happen now because of what's happened?
Oh, definitely. I think, you know, I don't know how everyone else felt, but I feel like it was pretty universal amongst a lot of people that you just sort of, at that moment, you just took a step back and you just went, okay, what's going to happen now? You know, it was so unpredictable, especially in those early few months. So for us, we were just, you know, we were determined to keep making this film. I think the big question that was floating around was, you know, how much of an impact is this going to have? How long will this be around? You know, there were a lot of questions early on that no one knew the answer to, and if this was part of the story or not. And I think just as the season evolved, it became obvious how much a big part of, you know, on the 150th year, the fact that this has happened, and we're telling a story about community and what football means to people and how it can keep people connected through the tough times in life. Yep. And so, like, this sort of was telling that story even more so, because the people that are so connected through football no longer had football.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you know, how can you keep connected, or what does football mean when coming back? And yeah, so I think it was more so just trying to find, you know, what the ending was. Is it when football comes back, or, you know, Port Adelaide then were doing so well during the season, and it was becoming this real kind of fairy tale for a lot of people. So yeah, I think kind of it was important to us to just keep following where it took us and just be as adaptive and resourceful as possible.
And what was that like, talking to the community during that time? Because you did have the fact that there was no football being played that audiences could go to, but you also had that excitement that you had new players coming through the club like Connor Rosie that were kind of turning everything upside down. What was that like for the community that you were talking to at that time?
Well, there was a few people that I was kind of just, you know, checking in with at various times, either, you know, filming or just having phone conversations, and just getting a gauge of what people were doing or how they were coping with it or how they were keeping connected. So I think, yeah, at first it really was, you know, that's what people that are really, really passionate about their football club, that's what they look forward to the most in the year almost. It kind of, that's the timetable of their year. So for that to be interrupted, it was a huge impact on people's lives, and, you know, people make friends with the football, or, you know, so it was quite isolating for some people.
Yeah.
But then, you know, on the flip side, there's that story of once the season did kick off and people were reconnected, I think the emotions of that year was just amplified amongst people. It meant more almost after that.
Yeah.
After that hiatus, or knowing that at any moment, maybe things would have to stop, or, the stakes were probably higher than usual.
Definitely. You also got to premiere the film in Adelaide as well, with that community so close by. What was that like, and what did that mean to you that the film actually got to premiere in Adelaide?
Yeah, so we premiered it at Semaphore, which is actually sort of, in the heartland next to Port Adelaide. So, yeah, I think any time as a filmmaker when you get the opportunity to share your work with audiences, you're always a little bit worried, what are people going to think about it? But the amount of support I felt from that community, we did a lot of introduction of the films over that weekend. So we're sort of milling around where people were, and had a lot of really positive comments from people, and I think there's a bit of nostalgia in the film that some people really connected with, being such a kind of personal film set in Port Adelaide. Getting that core audience first was, there was a lot of positivity, and some good times then.
I guess now to finish up, now the film is getting exposed to a wider audience. What would you like to say to people right around Australia who are now going to get the opportunity to watch This Is Port Adelaide?
Yeah, so we are very lucky in that we've got a number of interstate screenings. So we did have some fans that were kind of asking, whether or not it was going to be able to travel to Melbourne or Sydney or anything. So we're very glad to be able to make that happen for them. But I suppose, aside from please come and see the film, the other message would be that, and, I think some people that have seen it have kind of backed this up, that they felt, even if they're a supporter of another football club, that there's a lot of universal themes in it, about what football means to people, about the passion of following a football club, that you don't necessarily have to be a Port Adelaide Football Club supporter to get something out of it.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Definitely. Well, Nicole, I know a lot of people out there are very excited to see the documentary. So again, I just want to say congratulations on such a brilliant documentary, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Not a problem. I'll let you go. Have a great day, and best of luck with the film being released around Australia.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Chat later.
Cheers.
Bye.